Solid notes, the open loop, the murder analogy, and the human moment are the kind of additions that earn their place rather than just adding length. Here's the integrated version, trimmed elsewhere to stay in range. Scientists have discovered that millions of people alive today carry DNA that never belonged to Homo sapiens. It came from another kind of human, one that vanished from the Earth more than 40,000 years ago. But that discovery raised a harder question, one that took over a decade to even begin answering. If these ancient humans disappeared, why are pieces of them still alive inside us, right now? Beneath your skin, inside every cell, there is a message written by something that was not entirely you. Scientists sometimes jokingly call it alien DNA. Not because it came from another planet, but because it came from another kind of human, one that once walked beside your ancestors, close enough to love, to fight, to interbreed. By the end of this story, you will understand why a tiny bone fragment from a Siberian cave changed what we thought we knew about human evolution, why some of that ancient code may still be influencing your immune system today, and why a population of humans that left no face, no skeleton, no name, still lives on inside you. Picture Denisova Cave, deep in the Altai Mountains, cold enough to preserve organic material for tens of thousands of years. In 2008, researchers pulled a fragment of bone from a child's finger, barely larger than a fingernail. There was nothing about it that looked extraordinary, but locked inside its cells was a genome unlike anything cataloged before. Not modern human, not Neanderthal, but a third lineage entirely, later named Denisovan after the cave itself. A single sliver of bone had just proven that our species had company we never knew about. But that wasn't the strangest discovery, not even close. The investigation that followed belongs largely to the Swedish geneticist Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute, who spent decades solving a problem many considered impossible. Imagine trying to read a book that spent 40,000 years buried in ice, its pages torn apart, stained by bacteria, smudged with the fingerprints of everyone who ever touched it. That was the task in front of them. In 2010, Pääbo's team finally published the first draft Neanderthal genome, and the comparison to modern humans revealed something almost nobody expected. People with ancestry outside Africa carry, on average, between 1 and 2% Neanderthal DNA, not as a museum curiosity, in their genome. In yours, if your ancestors ever left Africa. The two species hadn't simply crossed paths and moved on. They had children, somewhere, 40 or 50,000 years ago. Two people from different kinds of human met. We don't know their names. We don't know their language. We don't know if it was love or something closer to survival. But without that meeting, billions of people alive today would carry different DNA than the DNA they carry now. That alone would have been remarkable. But the Denisovan genome revealed something even stranger. In populations across Melanesia, Papua New Guinea, parts of the Philippines, and Australia, Denisovan ancestry climbs as high as 4 to 6%. Carry a gene variant called EPAS1, which helps the body use oxygen efficiently at extreme altitude. Geneticist Rasmus Nielsen and colleagues traced its origin, and it wasn't a mutation that arose in modern humans at all. It came from Denisovans, a population erased from the fossil record left behind a survival tool precise enough to let their distant descendants breathe comfortably at 12,000 feet. That's evolution, quietly filed away and handed forward. Found something they couldn't attach to any fossil at all. Evolution doesn't choose between gifts and curses, though. Sometimes the very process that helps one generation survive leaves another, tens of thousands of years later, expectedly vulnerable. In 2020, Pääbo and immunologist Hugo Zeeberg identified a segment of DNA on chromosome 3, inherited from Neanderthals, that significantly raises the risk of severe illness from COVID-19. The same ancient inbreeding that gave some populations an advantage also handed down a liability that, in a pandemic no one could have foreseen, would matter all over again. The past was never finished with us. It had simply been waiting. And that's where the story becomes even more unsettling. As researchers sequenced mortar genomes, particularly from African populations that showed little or no Neanderthal or Denisovan ancestry, they began finding genetic fragments that didn't match any known human relative. No cave, no skeleton, no fossil to attach a face to. Geneticists call it ghost DNA. Imagine solving a murder without ever finding the victim. That is essentially what geneticists have done. They know these ancient humans existed, not because anyone found their bones, but because their DNA is still hiding inside the people descended from them, alive right now, most of whom have no idea it's there. For decades, the popular image of Neanderthals in particular was unflattering, brutish, slow-witted, a footnote before modern humans supposedly outcompeted them into extinction. That story is largely wrong. It wasn't ignorant primitives losing to a superior species. It was two forms of humanity meeting, sometimes violently, sometimes not, close enough in mind and body to raise children together. The disappearance of the Neanderthals wasn't a clean replacement. It was an absorption. Their genes didn't vanish. They diluted into ours and in specific, measurable ways, still doing work inside your body today. For most of modern history, humanity assumed a clean line separated us from every other hominin that ever lived, that we were the outcome, and they were the failed drafts. The evidence says otherwise. Somewhere between 1 and 6% of the DNA carried by billions of people today did not originate in Homo sapiens at all. It arrived through contact with other kinds of human, some we can name, at least one population we may never be able to identify. The boundary between us and them was never as solid as we assumed. It was porous. It was biological. It was intimate. The next time you look in a mirror, consider this. The face looking back isn't only the product of Homo sapiens. It's the surviving echo of several ancient human lineages, carrying a story that began long before anything was written down. It isn't alien because it came from another world. Alien because it came from another kind of human. One whose face we've reconstructed from broken bone, whose language we'll never hear, whose entire civilization vanished so completely that genetics is the only proof it ever existed. Extinction never truly erased them. It simply changed their name to us.